is it the sort of thing... I'm really hesitant to suggest this because we talk about democracy and dictatorships every now and then. Aside from a benevolent dictator, which good luck finding one of those. Like, aside from a benevolent somebody or something forcing people to change, how on earth would you change it? Like, if people are sabotaging themselves because they believe the wrong kind of things. I mean, you can just, I guess, let them fail. Let them fail. Let anyone who can escape, escape. And then when the whole place is just an economic dead zone, then maybe you have some outside interests investing in enclaves to exploit the cheap labor. How it says, indeed, the power structure in the US seems to be designed to be nothing gets done unless all three areas are the same party. But then they deliberately don't allow... You know, yeah, you're right, Harvard. Like, the balance of the what do you call it? The checks and balances. How it says, and now Trump and Obama have increased the power of executive orders. It's even more unbalanced. Yeah. But you know, like, the left and the right, like, they've been so antagonistic for so long. They just don't trust each other and they don't work together. They just can't work together. Nor do they really want to. I mean, not all of the South is like this. So how do countries develop? Like a developing country now, I guess it's foreign investment, but it has to be the kind of foreign investment that's not just exploiting the locals and taking their resources. It has to be the kind of foreign investment that's also like intent on building a better society. Either the investors are somehow not entirely evil, or the locals have to demand that some of the money actually goes towards things like schools and hospitals and training and whatnot. How much cheap labor is there in the American South? Like, can you, let's say, build a factory there and then hire people to work, but the conditions, part of the condition for hiring people is that they have to send their kids to an actual school and not be bigoted. If you're bigoted, you're fired. I mean, maybe like government investments, like in infrastructure projects. How is this all kinds of bad unacceptable behavior is somehow lauded as worthwhile because of free speech, etc. down there? Yeah, no, the free speech thing. Which again, like, I'm so hesitant to suggest that we get rid of free speech or anything like that, because that's dangerous too. But the way people use free speech in America, like you give them the freedom to speak and they use their speech to just screw each other, and you're like, well, come on, dudes. That's not the point. You're supposed to... Like, we give you these freedoms, and you use it to oppress others. Like, what's that about? That wasn't the agreement. So I'm thinking, you know, like somebody big from the outside can come in and force a change. But I don't know if that's the only way or if that's the best way. That's the way I can think of right now. Either the federal government comes in and invests in stuff like infrastructure and in the process forces people to abide by whatever federal rules about non-discrimination or things like that. Or they like require job training, and so in the process they send people to school, to an actual school, for job training before they're accepted into whatever high-speed rail building project or whatever it is. Or solar panels. So governments can kind of do that. A big corporation, if it's not entirely exploiting the people, can do that. Although American corporations, I have very little confidence in. But say like a big corporation can say, okay, there's a whole lot of cheap labor here in the South. Let's open a factory and then train people and make money while also giving them jobs and training and education. Can the local people do it themselves? How would the local people do it themselves? The thing about this sort of thing, the thing about social change, is that there's a... somebody has to bear the cost. And individuals usually can't afford the cost. Most of the time, people just move away. And that actually makes the problem worse because, like, the smart people and the people who care are moving away, and you leave behind the people who can't move away. And so, like, the deplorables, I guess, just becomes more and more concentrated. As the people who, like, the people who want a different life are moving away, and so the people who are left behind are the people who want to continue that, whatever it is they're doing. Because, like, moving away is so much easier than staying to change things, right? Examples of economic development that doesn't involve colonialism. In recent times, it will be East Asia, India, maybe like Europe after the Second World War, but Europe, and I mean coming up also is Africa, but that's taking a while. I mean, again, like the Europe after the Second World War, there was the Marshall Plan. So again, it was somebody else. It was the Americans that time, coming in from the outside with a whole bunch of money, investing in rebuilding infrastructure, rebuilding cities, and also there was the rebuilding of Japan as well. Like the Americans were involved in that too. So like again, it's this model of somebody from the outside coming in, and really the locals didn't have too much of a choice because they lost the war, and they were literally occupied by the Americans at that point. Japan and parts of Europe, East Germany was occupied by one side, and West Germany was occupied by the other. I guess I'm talking about the West more than the East. So this model of like somebody else, a benevolent other with more power and more money coming in and fixing things for you. We keep coming back to this model, but I'm not sure this is the best way to do things. But it is the way that works, or it is one possible way that works. And quite possibly the most expedient way that works. China has developed very fast in recent decades, but that came after previous decades which were rather disastrous, with stuff like the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, and a lot of people died because of mismanagement. And so I guess in China they were left, well, they isolated themselves and they insisted on doing it themselves, but the price of doing it themselves was that they kind of made several mistakes before they figured out how to do it right. And literally millions and millions of people died in those mistakes. Cultural Revolution is the big one. And I guess the question I would ask is that better? Is it better that they do it themselves, but then you risk them just not figuring out the first 2 times or 2 or 3 times before they finally figure it out? And there's no, that's not to say China has entirely figured it out, because it still has issues. I guess every country has issues. At least they've solved the economic part, more or less. Things were less disastrous. Japan, I guess South Korea too. Well, no, there was Korean War, and then South Korea developed okay, but North Korea did not. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea were considered the 4 Asian tigers because of their remarkable economic development, but they were kind of following the Japanese model too, I think. And in Hong Kong, at least, I'm kind of familiar with the British government. Well, it took a while there too. After the leftist riots in the 60s, I think it was, the British government really invested. Again, with coming back in the same model, the British government invested in big infrastructure projects in Hong Kong, like expanding the the airport and building the subway system. Again, it's an outside power bringing money in. This time it's the British bringing money into Hong Kong to give the local people employment and opportunities to access things like education. Right, so my dad talks about his father getting hired to like break rocks to pave the runway in the new airport. So they were just kind of there with hammers breaking rocks. And they were paid like a few dollars a day to just kind of smash rocks all day long. And that's how they got enough money to send my father to school, not even to university, but just to like finish high school. And then my father got a decent job, again a government job, which then got enough money to send the rest of us to New Zealand and to send me to university and things like that. And they were government jobs, and so it was the British government pouring money to develop Hong Kong to provide the local people with employment and economic opportunities and education opportunities. Again, it's a foreign power. It's not the local people doing it themselves. Of course, the local people had to work for the money as well. But the money came from outside, like the Marshall Plan. I'm not sure I like where this analysis is going. I'm not sure I like the idea of having to rely on someone else from the outside to fix your problems. But maybe that is mostly how things work. Huh. Alright, so now we punch soil and punch rocks. Let me come down here and do my part in breaking rocks all day long to build this train network. So the glowstone goes there, and I need gold blocks, and somewhere in the middle of this, if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I didn't mean to break that one. Let me get my dirt block.